So in this video, we're going to talk about a process of writing a research paper. This is not the only process that you can use to write a research paper, but it is an effective one, especially if you aren't quite sure how to get started. So we're going to use this assignment as an example. You may or may not have this assignment in your class, but we're going to talk about how you would use this process in order to write an entire paper. So it's called Observe, Analyze, and then Thesis. And so we can call it OAT for short, but we start with observations. So in this particular assignment, what it asks students to do is to start by watching the advertisements and writing down their observations. Now, you can obviously use this for advertisements, but you can also use it for any other kind of paper that your professor has assigned you that's a research paper. And what you'll do is you'll start by observing the thing, whatever it is that they've told you they want you to write about. So it could be that they're having you write about literacy. It could be that they're having you write about, issues within your own community. Whatever it is, you just want to go out and observe that subject matter. And so what you're looking for in this part of the process, this initial phase, is to see the concrete details happening in it. So in this case, again, I'm using the example of advertisements. So you would watch these advertisements and you would just write down observations in the advertisements, not interpretations, which means you're just watching what actually literally happens on the screen. So details like, this particular song played, this actress was present in the advertisement, these colors were used, this style of directing was used, they had this car in the advertisement, this was the dialogue, right? So you're just saying literally what is happening on the screen, what you can take in with your senses. So what you see, what you hear, all of those kinds of things. So you're paying attention to things like music, whether the product shows up, if it doesn't show up, what kind of location the action takes place in. But at this point in the process, you're not saying that this is a good thing or a bad thing, or that you liked it or didn't like it or anything like that, right? You're just saying this is what happened. And so again, this can work for a variety of different subjects. You can do this if you were assigned a paper about a social problem that's happening within your community, or, something like that. You would just go out and you would see, what do people on both sides have to say about this issue? You're not assigning judgment, though. You're not saying this side is right or this side is wrong. You're just saying, these are the facts. These are the things that I can see with my own eyes, that I can hear with my own ears, that people are saying about this topic, what's actually happening in the community, what you can see. No judgment, right? So you're just taking down observations. The second part of this process is doing analysis. This is where you start drawing conclusions about your observations and making meaning out of them. So you might want to notice what connections you see across all of the advertisements. What did you only see across cologne advertisements or perfume advertisements? Are there common themes? What emotion is used? What character was used? Was logic used? If you can tell who the advertisement audience is, right? So this is something that can really help you in your analysis, is if you can say, well, it was obviously directed towards this particular group of people because this thing happened and other people wouldn't be interested in that, right? Often we can tell which generation or gender or race or ethnicity or things like that an advertisement is being directed towards. I've given the example before with my students of, if you see two McDonald's advertisements and one advertisement features a child and they are getting their Happy Meal and they're playing in that play place and having a great time, that advertisement is directed towards children and towards parents, right? Because other people aren't really necessarily going to be interested in that. Whereas another advertisement for McDonald's might feature somebody who's busy and on their way to work and they don't have time to eat breakfast, but they're so hungry. And so they see the McDonald's sign and that they have, Egg McMuffins. And so they stop and they get their sandwich and now they're ready to start their day. Those are both advertisements for McDonald's, right? So we could say, well, the advertisements are directed towards people who eat fast food or to people who like McDonald's, but that's not really the case here. One is directed towards parents and children, and one is directed towards working adults. So two very different advertisements and two very different audiences, right? And so these are the kinds of things that you want to do in your analysis is look at what you've written down in your observations and start drawing conclusions about who the advertisement is directed towards and how you can tell. Why did they choose this particular route to go with their advertisement? Things like that. And again, you can do this for other subjects as well. If we're looking at something that's happening in the community and you say, well, this group A who supports this thing that's happening in the community has said X, Y, and Z, and group B who doesn't support this thing that's happening in the community has said, JKL, and here's how, why they use it. Here's how I can tell who their audience is, how I can, understand why they're using ethos instead of pathos, whatever it is that they're doing. And that's going to help you do some analysis. And then the final step of this process is the thesis. And so the thesis part of this is, what is your overall argument going to be in your paper based on your observations and based on your analysis? Now, this may seem backwards to some students. Oftentimes, especially in high school, we may be taught you want to start with your introduction and writing your thesis statement, and then you'll write your body paragraphs next, supporting your thesis statement, and then the conclusion. Oftentimes, though, you'll find your professors will suggest that you maybe start with your body paragraphs and then write your introduction and conclusion. And part of that is because of this. If I have you start with your thesis statement, if I just say, you're going to watch these 4 advertisements, and then I want you to write a thesis and then start coming up with stuff to support it, it's going to change probably what your thesis is and also what kinds of observations and analysis you even decide to do, because you're probably only going to find analysis and observations that are going to support your thesis statement. Whereas if you start with observations and then do analysis, you will come up with a thesis statement that is probably more nuanced and more interesting because you have already done all of the work. And if there are things that don't quite match with your thesis, you can choose to just get rid of them, but you can also choose to incorporate them and say, well, this doesn't quite line up, but here's why I think that is, right? And that'll make your paper more interesting. So this is the process of OAT, or observing first and then doing analysis and then doing your thesis statement. And so it's one method of writing that you might try in order to get a more nuanced paper and to be able to really notice all of the things that are going on in this particular topic that you're being asked to write about.